What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. This is the mid-week college basketball betting preview. I'm Stuckey. Joining me, as always, my fellow BBOC co-hosts, Mike Calabrese and Tanner McGrath. Like we will do each and every Tuesday for the remainder of the season, we will recap the weekend. Some good, bad, maybe some ugly. And then we will give out some looks for Wednesday and Thursday's card. If you are new to the show, welcome. Little just scheduling recap for how this podcast has been operating and will continue to do so for the remainder of the season. 3-man weave early in the week. This episode, Tuesdays, covering Wednesday and Thursday. And then myself, Mike, and Greg Waddell will be back on Thursday nights to look at the weekend card. Gentlemen, let's start off with some good, although I can wrap up some good, bad, and ugly all into who I want to mention, Caleb Love. I'm probably going to pay for this. The gambling gods are going to make me pay for this for the next couple weeks, but I had Arizona. Caleb Love could not hit a wide open shot to save his life. And that's what you need to do against Iowa State. You have to hit open threes. He couldn't. And then, of course, he hits a 60-footer, thrilling, at the bell, and then catches fire in overtime and hands Iowa State a devastating loss, one that I definitely didn't deserve. But that was a thrilling game. Mikhail was on fire. And now Iowa State finds itself 2 games back of Houston because Houston, talk about pulling a rabbit out of your hat. Pretty wild weekend in the Big 12. I think one of you guys has that coming up. We'll talk about that game. That is my good. Also, I'd like to quick shout outs to Dawson Garcia. Had a week. Minnesota is playing really good basketball. They're not going to be, they could have a say here on some bubble teams, and they're definitely playing a lot better. Yeah, that's it for my good. Tanner, I'll go to you. What do you got to recap? How about UMBC? UMBC now's a wagon after after they laid an egg against Maine, huh?
I don't know what happened to Vermont's interior defense on Saturday. That was ridiculous. They shot 23 for 30 from 2-point range, 17 for 21 at the rim against Vermont. I mean, Vermont, they're still hurt, but that was just a breakdown defensively on all 3 levels, and I am worried about them going forward. But
zone Vermont forever, right?
Yeah, pretty much. But I think Hurley's going to be back this week, so things could change there. But for my good, I do want to mention I like to go. I feel like I like to go under the radar, more mid-major level things for this segment, but I cannot ignore what Janai Broome did on Saturday in a game between Tennessee and Auburn where nobody could score. I mean, it was disgusting start to finish. The 2 teams combined to shoot 7 for 42 from 3. 51-53 was the final score. And Broome, who I don't think looked 100%. I think he looked maybe...
I agree. He was not 100%.
Yeah.
I was surprised why rush back for that game.
Yeah, I mean, he was definitely a little hobbled here and there, but he came out, scored 16 points, and grabbed 14 boards, including 6 on the offensive end and 8 on the defensive end, which is huge for a team that has struggled to rebound in conference play. He had 4 perfectly timed blocks. I mean, he's just so his craft and his IQ really showed in this game, I thought. Including, I mean, look, I know he missed a front end down 2 at the end, but he also made the biggest play of the game, which was he miraculously recovered his own blocked shot on a roll with 40 seconds left and found Miles Kelly in the corner for the game-winning 3. He just was a warrior, not fully healthy, in a super physical game with a super physical team, and really willed them to that 2-point victory. And I was just so impressed. I love this Auburn team. I really think they're going to win the whole thing, and Broome is a big reason why. And I was just really impressed that he came out hobbled and carried his team to a big win there. So I want to mention Janai Broome. That's my guy this week.
I'm going to still say that Chad Baker-Mazar does something dumb and costs Auburn in the tournament.
Sure. I can see it.
Calabrese?
I'm glad that you shouted out Dawson Garcia. I believe he's the first Golden Gopher in over 6 years to score 20 plus across 5 games. They're 3-1 against the spread in their last 4 coming into Tuesday night. And just in general, I think the Big Ten is so deep that obviously you're going to lose track of some of these teams to the bottom. The best case scenario, they'd have to get to 19, 20 wins before the Big Ten tournament to have any shot really to be on the bubble. And I think, at least entering Tuesday, they're 11-9. But when the bottom teams in the Big Ten are this entertaining, I think it's pretty fantastic. And it's great to see him just putting the whole team on his back, making them a fun watch. Because at the Barn, they're always an interesting team to play. And now they're showing some fight on the road as well, with not just against the spread, but winning outright. So that's exciting. This isn't necessarily me clowning on some of these top teams, but when I look at the AP top 10, when I look at basically consensus power rankings, you have teams like Alabama, Florida, Houston, Michigan State, Marquette, Purdue. I'll kind of throw it to you guys. In my opinion, that grouping, almost 6 of the top 10 teams, I could see perfect storms setting up where in the second round, just to get out of the first weekend, it could get a little bit dicey for some of those teams. And a big part of that as well is what's happening on the 7 through 10 line, at least when you look at a bracket matrix and a lot of these projections. If a team like Michigan State or Marquette ran into a Utah State or a Creighton or a Maryland or a Gonzaga, even UConn, like we've thrown plenty of dirt on the Huskies and for good reason. But if they enter the tournament as like a 9 seed, like who's looking past them or guaranteeing a victory against the back-to-back champs? So I'm always kind of keeping my eye on the horizon for what the tournament could give us. And it's been a while since the 8-9 line has been that feisty. And obviously there's going to be so much movement. A team like Utah State could just, reel off 14 to 15 down the stretch or something like that and, seal up a 6 or 7 seed. But if they're in that 8-9 line with a lot of these talented teams like a Maryland there as well, I think it's interesting. This is getting me encouraged. Usually I'm a little bit of a Debbie Downer talking about the mid-major teams who aren't going to make it. But for some of these power conference teams that have either struggled or they haven't put it together or haven't been consistent, I think that certainly speaks to a team like Maryland or UConn. That could make the round of 32 really, really interesting for the 1 seeds outside of Auburn and Duke. So I'm excited to see what that brings next month, or I should say 6 weeks.
Stuckey, you've talked about this, how you think like the some of the parity at the top is going to create like a really awesome, chaotic tournament, especially after 2 years of just beat downs from UConn. It seems like, that top, there's just so much parity at the top. You don't know what could happen in the tournament.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an amazing tournament. There's a crazy amount of parity. I mean, you could say that, you have like your tier 1 teams. Like I would still throw, especially once Iowa State's fully healthy, Iowa State up there with Auburn, Duke, Houston. But like after that, it's wide open. I mean, Michigan State projects as a 2 seed right now. I that team is to me extremely vulnerable. I mean, they're on this huge streak. I mean, who have they really beat? They beat Illinois when Illinois is dealing with some stuff, and their best player basically gets whistled out of the game. Rutgers, then that's one of my rants. I'm so tired of losing money on Rutgers. I can't figure out their injury situation. I was told Dylan Harper's going to be good to go. Then he's in the starting lineup, not plays a little bit, then just parks on the bench in the second half. But I don't think this Michigan State team is your normal, very dominant 2 seed. I think they're vulnerable. The Tennessee offense still has limitations. I mean, just looking at these 2 seeds, Florida, I believe in, but could see them not making out of the first weekend. Same with Marquette. And I think it's going to be an amazing, amazing tournament. You mentioned UConn. UConn needs to figure out their defense. I mean, just their basic ball screen defense. They're lost. They cannot defend without fouling. It is insane. Their defense right now is a disaster, to say the least.
Can't stay in front of the dribble.
No.
McNeely's coming back, though, I think.
Yeah, McNeely will help. I think he'll help more on the offensive end. Because they need to just – their defense, it's like a structural issue. and I'm not sure how much he's going to solve. They have some work to do. They got to like just change something up on what they're doing schematically on defense, because it's definitely not working right now. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on, before we get to the bad. So Duke they're obviously on a run here. They've won 14 straight, but like, and they had that home win over Auburn to kick things off. They won at Louisville, and since then it's like, who's it really come against? I don't think that arguably the last 9 teams that they beat, maybe there's a chance none of them go to the tournament. So Cooper Flagg is only getting better. He's playing at a historic level. But do we fully trust Duke's? Because I think Duke's also been better since James took over full-time point. But do we trust the Duke backcourt if they go up against a team that is going to just they have someone who can at least give Flags some issues, just some resistance? Do you trust the rest of the Duke offense? Because I think it's pretty clear that the defense is elite. But do we trust the Duke backcourt? I mean, we're not going to get that many data points. Illinois will be a good one. They got Carolina twice, but the ACC is so down that Duke is going to be one of those teams where I'm going to still have some questions about the offense outside of Flagg headed into the tournament, because the ACC is so down this year. Tanner, do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, you're right that the defense, I think the defense is the best in the nation. I think they're elite and so versatile at all 5 positions. They have so much length. They can stop you on the ball. There's like 0 ways to score on them. They'll even throw in some zone too. Yeah,
to switch things up.
And it's just lengthy. Like they just contest everything. Yeah. It's great. But the offense, so I actually think this might be a Shire thing more than anything, because he has been so insistent on running these methodical half-court sets in 65 possession game scripts where they just run stagger screen after stagger screen on the outside. And while it's, I guess, worked at times, if you run into a good like drop coverage unit in the tournament, I think they're going to be super vulnerable if they can't get off those catch and shoot opportunities. If I was Shire, I would start running more. I'd try to get out and transition more. This roster I think there's a lot of athleticism here when you have Flagg, who is so versatile as an offensive playmaker. And I feel like he's getting almost sandwiched into this like schematic thing that Shire is doing. I think that there are ways to open up how athletic this roster is that Shire is not currently doing with how structured he's being, if that makes sense. Last year it worked with Filipowski, where you could just run, because he was such a good short roll player. You could just feed the offense through him in the post and just run that over and over. I think this offense could be way more dynamic if you really open it up and unleash it.
Yeah. You have any thoughts, Calabrese, on Duke?
I mean, we're nitpicking here. We're trying to find, some cracks in their overall resume and how they play. But I think it's worth noting, you look at the Miami game, you look at the Wake game, Cooper Flagg had 13 turnovers in those 2 games. And then you date back to the early season, the struggles late in games against Kansas and Kentucky. I think what happens a little bit, and they're just not going to get to test it out, if the guards aren't as confident as they need to be come March, and he is a ball-dominant player at the very end of games, and that still is a high turnover rate, is that going to burn them again in a close game? And do you have an opportunity even to work out those late game scenarios other than in practice? I think that could hurt them. How much does that hurt them? Do they end up just, winning, going away in every tournament game till they get to the Final Four? There's also a high likelihood of that. They could win every game by double digits. So we'll see. But I agree with Tanner's assessment in terms of there is kind of a perfect storm in terms of a defensive team and the way in which they play and the way that they force Duke to potentially beat them on the perimeter and with more steady guard play. I could see it, but right now the only thing I can point to is Flagg's turnover issues at times. But what's interesting is his efficiency numbers are so good, and he's stuffing the stat sheet at such a historic rate everywhere else. It's easy to overlook that, and he impacts the game so much that he makes up for those turnovers. But when you're playing the Canes and we're playing the Demon Deacons, that's a lot different than playing, a 4 or 5 seed in the second weekend of March Madness.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, I'm a full believer in Duke's defense. Their offense is obviously really good, but still some questions. I do think it's a good thing that they had two quasi close games, and their offense responded down the stretch because they've just been blowing out everyone for a while. And I think it's like a good thing for their offense to feel some late game pressure over the last two games for a team that's projected to win many games by wide margins.
But it
The
also
rest
showed their
of the way.
deficiencies against Wake when all of a sudden that perimeter oriented
Yeah.
offense, they missed. I think
Yeah.
they went through a 1 for 17 shooting stretch. That could totally happen in the tournament. I'm happy that
Yeah.
you're right that they overcame that and bounced back, but it definitely showed like exactly where the weakness in the roster is.
Yep. Yeah, and you're going to be facing better teams than Wake.
Yeah.
In the tournament. For what it's worth, Wake Forest defense has impressed me this year. Their offense is still really limited. Let's get to the bad or the ugly for some rants of the week. I'll let one of you guys hit Kansas. That was unbelievable. Also, Iowa. Iowa's in free fall mode of late. Mentioned the UConn defense, which I think is in trouble right now. Rutgers injuries. I just need clarity there, please, once. So I mentioned everything. I'll see if there's anything else that I didn't mention. So, Tanner, I'll go to you. You want to talk some melts here?
So this I'm in the middle of an all-time gambling cooler right now, and this happens to me every year where I dominate the non-conference. I hit like 60% of my plays in non-con, and then I go through a terrible late January or early February slump. And there's always one consistency in these slumps, and it's college teams melting big leads late. Just last Thursday, I had Lowell and Albany in Amy's play, both laying under 2. Both were up double digits at the half. Both melted and lost outright in overtime. Lowell was up 4 with 30 seconds left. They were up 85-81. And Quincy Clark, this man has been at times the worst starting point guard in the America East this year. He fouls AJ Lopez on a 1-and-1 to cut the lead to 1, and then he turns the ball over back to AJ Lopez on the inbounds, and then who hits another layup, and they lose by 1. The Iowa one on Friday night was insane. They're up against Penn State at home, laying 2. They're up 8 with 3.5 minutes left. They did not score for the final 3 minutes and 30 seconds, and they missed 6 of their final 7 free throws, including 3 front ends. It is just sickening stuff. One consistent thing whenever you're going through slumps and betting the sport is just these ugly end of game melts. Breeze, you want to talk about the Kansas one? Because the Kansas one was so bad.
So
yeah, especially if you had Kansas plus money. But yeah, just to respond to that before you hit that, Calabrese says, yeah, there's the course of a college basketball season. You're almost inevitably going to have a stretch like that. You just have to accept it, and you can't let it get to you. You can't go until I talk about this every year. There's nothing worse because college basketball, bad beats. And when you're in that stretch and you can just feel it, you can feel them coming. Then it's like there's 4 minutes to go. You're up 6, laying 1.5. You miss a front end. You know that the other team's going to hit a 3, or they miss a front end, get the offensive rebound. You know a 3 is coming, and then you go through those streaks. It can be brutal. So hang in there. You'll be okay. What Calabrese, but the Kansas game. Talk about 6 points. I didn't even realize 6 point. Talk about 6 point leads.
A pair of them. I mean, it was wild. I had written that up as one of my top plays. Kansas +2 per KenPom. I borrowed this from somebody's tweet. Houston had a 0.4% chance to win when Kansas had the ball and a 6 point lead with 20 seconds left remaining in the first overtime. And I'm going to admit this. I was watching that game after they did blow it in regulation. They force OT up by 6 with the ball. They get fouled. I switched over to Shogun on FX. I was trying to sneak in a little episode, and I was like, oh, this is fine. And I make it through an entire battle scene, and I pull up my phone looking for that green dot, and it says double overtime. I'm like, well, no, that's impossible. And then I'm going back on YouTube TV watching how it unfolded. Here is how unlikely it was. The Houston's win in terms of games between AP top 25 teams over the past 15 seasons, there was 1,487 such games. It was the most improbable win, according to KenPom, that they've ever recorded. that a team came back in that situation. And I agree with you, Stuck. It is great to message this out. My blood was boiling. I had that feeling like, okay, I got it. That was a win. I deserve that win. I need to go and put another play in the Action Network act. I was like, nope, I'm just going to step back. I can't undo the bad juju of that moment. It just is what it is. But separately, I want to talk about Kansas. Usually you don't want to overreact too much, but this is a game that Kansas would never have lost in the past 20 years under Self, essentially. Like, this team just does not have that it factor their entire regular season outlook is now altered by blowing that game at home and to an offense that we had just talked about, last week in terms of Houston not having enough from their backcourt. I understand that, there was a miracle 3 in there and there was tons of missed foul shots, but Houston made the plays to make it happen. And Kansas just, I don't know, the killer instinct is gone. I think the fire is gone a little bit from the sideline as well. He's not pushing the right buttons. I don't want to totally overreact, but in terms of a deep Big 12 with also a home loss to West Virginia earlier this regular season as well, like, I think this is it. I'm sticking a fork in Kansas being a true contender in the Big 12. And it's kind of shocking, to be honest, because doing that for 40 plus minutes against Houston and their defense and what they're able to accomplish and then to choke it away it's still shocking. I'm not quite over it.
Yeah, crazy. Up 6, give up a 3 with 7 seconds, turn it over, give up a 3. I think the most jarring thing for me in that game was, I would argue, for as long as I've been watching college basketball, the best out of bounds coach. So after a timeout, out of bounds, draw up something is, to me, Bill Self. And they had one disaster at the end of regulation where they didn't even get a shot off. They turned it over. And then turning over the pass after the 3. And then Dickinson floats out to the guy. Oh my God, it was just such a disaster. So, yeah, huge swing game in the Big 12. By the way, I'd mentioned that I was going to tell a story about the first weekend of the NCAA tournament, which is my favorite weekend of the year every year. So people keep asking me, am I going to go to the games in Lexington since they're hosting games on the first weekend? And there's 0% chance of that. Like, I'm not missing other games. Like, I would never even consider it. I haven't missed a minute of a game on the first weekend. Maybe, I don't know, since I was like 6. My parents would used to let me stay home from school on those first 2 days, middle school, high school. And then in college, it was always lined up with our spring break. And did I go on spring break in college once? No. I went home. I would have a room stocked with one year I got a keg to myself, but a room stocked with alcohol. I would go back to my mom's. My mom would make me like big sheet of eggplant parm, and I couldn't have been happier. I had no FOMO, no regrets of not going to spring break. So no, I'm not going to Lexington. My wife will make me an eggplant parm. My wife's taking over that role, and I will be on my couch from 11 a.m. until the last game. 13-hour sweats, do it again the next day, do it again the next day, do it again the next day. It's the best. It's the best weekend. What were we going to say, Calabrese?
I'm just viewing you as the precursor to Uber, just driving all your friends to the airport, going to Cancun, going to the Dominican. It's like, enjoy your spring break. I am going to be here sweating, a Virginia Grand Canyon game and enjoying every second of it.
I was in Burlington last year for the America East tournament, and I was out at a bar watching some of the conference tournament games, and I met this kid who actually recognized me from some of my Vermont writing. And he was like, I was just like, so it's spring break and you're sitting here in a bar in Burlington still, like, why aren't you home? He's like, I didn't want to miss all the ball. Didn't want to travel. So he stayed, he watched all the Vermont games. And yeah, that's true degeneracy.
All right. Before we get to some midweek games, the stage is set for Super Bowl 59 and the many prop bets to come. That means now is the perfect time to upgrade to an Action Pro subscription, because only Action Pro subscribers get real-time pick alerts from our experts like Super Bowl prop masters Sean Kerner and Chris Raybon, plus all the tools you need to turn a profit betting in 2025. Right now, new subscribers can get $40 off a year of Action Pro at actionnetwork.com/SB for Super Bowl. Again, that's actionnetwork.com/SB. That's $40 off for the full year, so you'll be covered for the Super Bowl, March Madness, baseball, NBA, and even next college football and NFL season. So don't wait. Visit actionnetwork.com/SB to get $40 off of Action Pro. And if you're looking for early Super Bowl props from Sean Kerner, Chris Raybon, and more, check out the Action Network podcast for 2 sets of live shows this Wednesday and next Wednesday. The first will be at 4 p.m. Eastern and the second at 6 p.m. Eastern. So mark your calendars for Wednesday, January 29th and Wednesday, February 3rd at 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern on the Action Network YouTube page and in the Action Network app. The lines on these props move quickly, so you absolutely want to be there live. And it's another reason to have your notifications on as a pro subscriber to get them instantly. Kind of sad I didn't get mentioned as a prop expert. I'm an awful prop player, but this playoffs I just bet tight end props and they've been cashing. Hopefully it continues to the Super Bowl, but yeah, make sure you check that out. But let's get to some midweek looks. I'll kick things off. We just talked about Houston. I think the best spot on the board this week, like just situationally, is West Virginia. I mean, this to me, I don't know. Can we get 7+? We'll see. These spots, huge tax on them. I mean, West Virginia, home game in a big game, one of the best home court advantages in all of college basketball, in my opinion. I do think it helps that they saw this Houston defense recently, and they're coming off 2, I would say, bad losses at home against Arizona State, at Kansas State. Should get a max effort here. And Houston, after that thrilling win, hit the road for a second straight game. You had, Roberts played 46, 47 minutes. Pryor played 48 minutes. So, maybe there's a little flat, sluggish start. Maybe the legs aren't there on the jumpers as well as they might be usually. So, West Virginia, well-coached team. Big game, Javon Small. I'm going to be looking at West Virginia on
there
Wednesday
is
night in Morgan.
An 8.5 available.
Ooh,
FYI.
not really a spot tax.
I was also looking at the spot. I like West Virginia a lot.
When we were talking, Tanner,
where's that at?
I didn't know it was going to be 8.5. I thought it would be 5. So 8.5.
FanDuel.
Perfect. I will be on that.
All right, I'll hop in with a Wednesday play. I like St. Mary's laying up to the edge of a possession. You'll get Torvik, Evan Mia. It's kind of a coin flip. I think they both have it -1 right now. I get it. The Broncos, they beat Gonzaga after years of the Zags just essentially dominating them up and down the floor. They could never buy a win against them. They've now won 2 of the last 3 against Mark Few. They break through the 100-point threshold, but I still think that says more about the Bulldogs' issues on the defensive end than necessarily Santa Clara ready to be in that 2 or 3 slot in the West Coast Conference all the way through, conference tournament time. They're up against the Gales here. They're a top 30 team on both ends of the floor, according to Ken Pom. They're methodical, maybe more so than any team in the entire country under Randy Bennett. They're a perfect 5-0 on the road this year, which is 5th in the Haslam metric away from home ranking. They're also 2nd in momentum. They're playing great basketball. They're 9-3 straight up against quad 2 and quad 3 teams. They're an elite rebounding team, top 30 in work on the glass on both ends, and they don't beat themselves, which is kind of a hallmark of Bennett's teams when it's really rolling. They're only turning it over 9.8 times per game. Their opponents just are not getting to the foul line. They take fewer than 15 foul shots per game, so you have to earn it. Like, the Gales are just not going to give it away. And I understand that this is on the road and this is a big spot for Santa Clara, but I still think that they are a class better. I think they're a 2-possession better team in this spot. So as long as this isn't north of 3, I'm going to take them. I also think that, the game within the game they're going to kill them on the inside. Santa Clara is barely 250th in 2-point percentage defense. They can get into the lane, they can get into the post and score. And then finally, Tyree Bryan, is he available? Because he wasn't in the last game against Oregon State. They failed to hit 70 points. He's such an integral part of what they're doing on the perimeter. They don't get to 70, as I mentioned, and they lose by 14 going away. So if he's not going here, then I would stretch this all the way up to SMC -5. What do you think about that one, Tanner?
Bit of a tough spot for Marys, maybe, but they're the better team. I am not 100% sold on Santa Clara, who I think has all the talent in the world and all the upside, but it seems like they've never quite put it all together yet this year.
I just have to give credit to, one of the best coaches in college basketball, and Randy Bennett. This team just doesn't miss a beat. You talk about some of their losses. Look at what. By the way, Aiden Mahady finally had a good game for UConn on Saturday, and although he had some dumb mistakes too, but look at what Josh Jefferson's doing for Iowa State. He's dominating in the Big 12. Look at some of their losses, and St. Mary's hasn't missed a beat.
They also have Saxon as that drop coverage defender, as the anchor, who's been there for 5 years, and he's just such a steady force underneath that allows Bennett to run that scheme. He's awesome.
Yeah, and they're just dominating teams on the offensive glass, which has been huge for them. By the way, what is that? One of the other reasons I like West Virginia. What is that total? Because West Virginia in these big games just turns the game into
22.5.
Yeah. So 8.5 is even more valuable in a game that might not reach 120. Because Houston, how Houston plays, and West Virginia especially in these big games, is just slowing the game down to a crawl. So points at a premium for sure. Tanner, what do you got?
I'm looking at Furman as a home dog. Any home dog price against Samford. This is Wednesday night, I think 6 p.m., one of the first games that kicks off on Wednesday night. I adore the SoCon. I think we all do. The depth of that league is awesome, and it's a skill-based league, right? It has the highest three-point rate of all 32 conferences, just under 46%. It's a shooter's league. Therefore, three-point variance can really make or break you in this league, and I think Furman has been snake-bitten a bit. They're shooting 32% from deep in league play, while opponents have shot 37%. It's led to a disappointing 4-4 start in league play. The loss to VMI was bad. They barely staved off Mercer on the road in their last game. But I think that's made them a little bit undervalued, and I think they're now in a huge kind of circle the wagon spot against the class of the league in Samford. I just expect max effort here from the Dins, who did manage to upset Samford at home last January before losing on the road later that season, and then
they lost in the SoCon title. I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's a bit of a revenge spot. And the red hot 7-1 in SoCon play Bulldogs are way overdue for a loss. They're off wins over Chattanooga and Wofford too. 2 tough games against SoCon contenders, and their last few road efforts did not really impress me. Beating Mercer by 1. Probably could have lost to Chattanooga if the Mocs didn't shoot 19% from 3. Samford's only 3-6 against the spread on the road this year. The real schematic key to this game for me is that it's really surprising that Furman's gotten unlucky with opposing three-point shooting variance, because they are such an excellent three-point and catch-and-shoot denial defense, and that is so important against buckyball, which does nothing but spread you out and shoot. I'm worried about Furman's transition defense a little bit, which is vulnerable on a per possession basis, but a good way to avoid defending in transition is to not turn the ball over against the buckyball press zone scheme. Furman's been a decent ball handling team, especially with PJ Smith playing at an all conference level. They've been an above average press and zone offense this year. And like most Bob Rishi led teams, Furman is excellent in their secondary motion creation. They pass the ball well, they shoot the ball well, and they cut off the ball well. Buckyball's press is vulnerable to teams that can cut behind it, and the zone is vulnerable to teams that could shoot over it. I think Furman can do both. For example, to reference that Chattanooga game again, the Mocs handled the press fine. They scored 14 points on 10 cuts. That's good, but they only shot 19% from 3. They do both. They win that game. And I think just in short, buckyball, Samford, that can look really their style can look really pedestrian when the Bulldogs aren't hitting a million threes off a million turnovers. I mean, just look at the East Tennessee State game. They scored 60 points at home. I think Richie can drop a great game plan in a good home spot to hand the Bulldogs an overdue loss, and I want them at any dog price to do just that.
I like it. I had that circled as well. Here's a team that's going to bankrupt me by the end of the year, but I'm still not a believer. Nebraska Omaha, who's won 9 straight, sitting on top of the summit. They can't keep getting away with this. I mean, they're shooting 45% from 3 in league play, holding teams to 30%. It's not a great defense. I mean, for example, South Dakota's played the harder league schedule, has the better 2-point defense in league play. Teams are shooting 40% from 3 against them. South Dakota's D is not any good for what it's worth, but their offense is. And I think they're going to be able to score on Omaha. They're not going to turn it over. They're going to get to the line a ton. The regression for Omaha behind the arc on both ends, it has to come eventually. So I'll be looking at the Yotes at home against Omaha. I mean, I do have to say that every time I do watch Omaha, Markel Sutton is a player. He can get buckets, but this team's playing above its head, mainly due to 3-point variance in league play. So, I'll be looking to back South Dakota. What else you got, Calabrese?
I got a themed card this week. I'm going with all these top teams in their mid-major or low-major league conferences going on the road. Arkansas State laying 8 at Southern Miss in Hattiesburg. Red Wolves are the class of the Sun Belt. You know, Taryn Todd has taken care of most of their scoring load on the perimeter. He's a really nice complement to Kobe Julian inside. But the reason why I love them and why they can score in spurts is Joseph Pinion transfers in from Arkansas. He was a 4-star recruit. He was a McDonald's All-American nominee, and he is just a 3-point bomber. They use him as just a killer on the perimeter. He's hitting 38% of his triples, and he's a volume shooter from out there. So I think they can have a scoring barrage and run away in this game. Because Southern Miss, what they really want to do in a lot of cases, there's plenty of Sun Belt teams that like to play slow. And you look at teams like App State, South Alabama, they want to play really slow. But Southern Miss speeds them up, gets them out of their comfort zone, and kind of, change the nature of the game, have it be more transition heavy. You saw what South Alabama was able to do, though. They elevated their tempo, and they won by 13 in that game against the Golden Eagles. But Arkansas State's not a team that you can speed up in the SBC. So that advantage goes out the window. It's really the only calling card for USM this season. I don't trust a home dog even catching close to 10 when they can't shoot. They're 277th in shooting efficiency. So if they're not getting, let's call it 15 points or more in fast break buckets and transition scores, then I don't see them hanging around in this one. So it seems like a lot, but I'll lay the 8 with the Red Wolves.
Tanner, what do you got next?
Yeah, Thursday night, Big Ten battle. You think that West Virginia is the most obvious spot of the week? I think it's Penn State hosting Ohio State on Thursday. I think it's the most obvious spot of the week. Ohio State due for a loss, heading on the road after back-to-back wins over Purdue and Iowa. Could also be a little mini sandwich spot. They have they go to Champaign on Sunday, to visit Illinois. Ohio State also not that good on the road. 338th nationally in Haslametrics away from home metric. Couple of notable results include a 14-point loss to Texas A&M, 34-point loss to Maryland, a double overtime win over Minnesota, who I know is playing better, but still. Meanwhile, Penn State is, I know they're 3-7 in Big Ten play, but they're due for a bounce back performance coming home after back-to-back road losses against Iowa and Michigan by a combined 5 points. And the Hawks and Wolverines shot a combined 23 for 51 from 3 in those two games, 45%. So maybe the luck on that side of the ball could flip. And Penn State's last 3 true home performances were a 4-point win over Northwestern, a 1-point loss to Oregon as 2.5-point home dog, and an 8-point win over Rutgers to snap a 4-game losing streak. I'm expecting a similar effort here. And I've made my disdain for this Ohio State team well known on these airwaves. I really am very low on this team compared to the market. I do not believe in them. I think that all their successes this season have been buoyed by unsustainable 3-point shooting splits from a team that doesn't even really profile well as a good 3-point shooting team. Even in the recent Purdue win, they shot 11 for 23 from 3, 48%, or in the Iowa win, where the Hawkeyes shot 7 for 25 from deep, or 28%. Ohio State ranks second to last in the Big Ten in rim and 3 rate, second to last in shot quality, shot selection metric. It's just a lot of mid-range, off-the-bounce jumper maestros, and their deficiencies are being hidden by solid variance. Their three-point shooting has regressed significantly in league play, and that's why it's led to a 4-5 record, and I suspect it will be 4-6 soon once opponents start hitting more threes. From a schematic perspective in this game, though, Ohio State has been creating almost exclusively off the bounce via ball screens or an ISO creation with, one of Thornton, Johnson, Mobley, Parrish, Royal, etc. But they're running that into a Mike Rhodes coached, aggressive, hard hedging ball screen and perimeter coverage defense that is elite at dribble penetration denial. Penn State they're mostly vulnerable to good short roll and pick and pop guys, like creative guys out of the short roll. I don't think Sean Stewart nor Aaron Bradshaw is that. And I can't quite figure out why this is happening, but Ohio State can't stop throwing the ball away. They rank dead last in the league in offensive turnover rate. They turn the ball over more than any Big Ten team but Michigan. They've recorded
That's
at
not good
least
against Penn State.
Not good against Penn State. Yeah, they've recorded at least 14 turnovers in 4 of their past 7 games, and they're the 4th worst press offense in the Big Ten. A lot of these are non-steal turnovers, which is really weird, which might negate kind of what Baldwin wants to do. But if you're having trouble hanging onto the ball, that bodes poorly against Penn State's on-ball pressure. On the other end of the court, a little mixed on the effectiveness of Ohio State's ball screen coverage against a Penn State team that lives in pick and roll creation. But, Ohio State's drop will invite Baldwin's on-ball screen creation. I think Baldwin can work in the middle of the floor. He's good he can pull up, he can draw defenders and dish for cutters. So regardless, the spot is too good. Give me Penn State hopefully laying something reasonable like 1 or 2.
Nick, does it matter to you? Puff Johnson, he'll probably be out. Nick Kern probably gets to start again. By the way, UNC could use Puff Johnson this year.
I know he's important, but Ace got hurt for a little bit, and then he had a few games where he wasn't playing as well. But as long as he's playing up to par, I am fine. Without Puff Johnson. Baldwin is one of the most important players in the country to what Penn State does on both sides of the rock. So,
yep. Thursday, do we buy low on Nebraska against Illinois, who I'm assuming they're going to be shorthanded again. Vucic has mono, so I assume he's going to be out. I don't think they're the same team without him. This has to be close to the bottom for Nebraska. The problem is they could just get torched from 3 here, which is always a risk with Nebraska. But if there's ever a max effort slam home spot for a team that's been good at home the last couple of years outside of this recent streak, it's here. You were shaking your head, Calabrese. No.
Now I'll lay up to 7 with the Fighting Illini. As you pointed out, 15-4 against the spread last year. Hoiberg on his home floor in Lincoln. But this Nebraska offense is terrible. They're 3rd from the bottom in the Big Ten in offensive efficiency per Evan Mia. They miss Tamanaga so much. They're barely inside the top 200 in 3-point percentage. They never get offensive boards. So fewer threes, fewer second chance buckets, and they're almost dead even in turnover margin. So where are they going to generate these better looks? And listen, I understand that Illinois is in a bit of a mini skid. Yaki Chonas gets, those early whistles against Michigan State. He fouls out. He also had some injury issues, but you don't have to look that far in the past. They go on the road at Assembly Hall and win by 25. They go to Eugene and win by 32. That was this month. It feels like it was a long time ago for the Fighting Illini, and I understand they're going to miss their big who has mono, but still, even with that, I think that they're just going to be able to put together a huge run or two. And honestly, I was kind of where you were about a month ago with the Cornhuskers Stuck, where I was saying to myself, Hoiberg is a quality coach. They still have an experienced roster. They're 28th in KenPom overall efficiency, but they haven't put it together. And then I started to think a little bit more Hoiberg took that team in 2013 to the Sweet 16. He hasn't won an NCAA tournament game since. How long is he going to ride on that performance from 11 years ago? Last year was supposed to be the year they get to the tournament. They don't even win a game. And this year, what are they, 2-6 to start in the Big Ten? I think the bottom's fallen out of this thing. And I think this is a spot for the Fighting Illini to get back on track because, as I mentioned, they've already put huge performances on the road on film this month. I think they close out the month of January with one more.
What do you think, Tanner?
The problem is, like, yeah, you're right. It is a max effort home spot, but I thought that about the last two home spots, and they came out and looked pathetic for 40 minutes. And one of the things that scares me is they're the worst pick and pop defense in the Big Ten. They're giving up like 1.3 points per possession, and Ivicic could just dominate on those sets. So
Yeah, but he's not going to play. He's not going to play.
Yeah, he's
not mono.
Yeah, I guess
out for a couple more weeks.
That's what makes it intriguing to me.
Yeah, I want to do it, but I've been burned too many times.
Nebraska's always treated me well. Have I bet them? Let's see. When did I bet? I bet them versus Indiana. I had Iowa against them.
I bet them against USC.
I bet them against UCLA.
Yeah.
I have not bet them since. So I might be doing it. I might be going against the Calabrese. That's it for me as far as spots I had circled. Don't love Wednesday, Thursday cards. I agreed with Furman for sure. Had Nebraska circled as a spot, and then West Virginia and South Dakota. Those are my weight without numbers being out. The spots I had circled. Calabrese, you got anything else?
Nope, that's it for me. Hopefully, I can get 2 of the 3 to the window here, and these road teams laying the points. I just from a pure, if you want to watch some good basketball, circle that St. Mary's Santa Clara game. I think that's going to be really telling in terms of who gives the Zags a run for their money down the stretch in the WCC. Still some good basketball on the West Coast.
No America East tips, Tanner, before we get out of here?
I was thinking pretty heavily. I haven't quite gotten through the matchup yet. Might bet Vermont at Binghamton on Thursday. The line is now projected like Vermont -1, which is just crazy. I mean, I think they're a little undervalued after that disgusting effort against UMBC. But I need to figure out exactly why UMBC carved up Vermont's interior defense, because you figure like Binghamton's also a rim dominant team, and you figure that with O'Leary patrolling the paint, no one's going to get to the rim. But if UMBC did it, Binghamton could easily do it. I got to figure that out. But yeah, I mean, theoretically, it's a good spot for Vermont.
Are you coming around on Maine? Yeah, Calabrese.
I was just going to say, you're the only one here on the pod with a play or a potential play with the head coach's phone number in your cell. Are you just going to hit up Becker and be like, are you going to stop a single goddamn layup at the rim or what?
I actually have been texting a couple of the guys. I'm trying to figure out if Hurley is healthy, TJ Hurley, because he missed the last game, which is a big reason why they couldn't score against UMBC, because they already couldn't score. And now the guy who the entire offense has been running through and is a first team All-Am East guy, just randomly misses a game with an ankle injury, 2 actually. So if he's back, then it makes Vermont even more enticing. Yes. Maine is the reason why I love Maine. They are going to see 3-point regression eventually, and it will hurt their offensive performance, but Markwood gets better with every single performance. Chris Markwood is legitimately the best coach in that league. The in-game adjustments, the game plans he comes out with every week are just staggeringly good, and that they're going to be right up there with Bryant by the time the year ends.
Becker slander?
He's had a couple of tough years, especially on the recruiting trail. I don't like the roster construction this year. I mean, so Long might be out for the year though, so he could get a red shirt, is what I'm hearing, and then he'd be back next year, which would be very interesting. But this roster is a little flawed. They needed a Deloney replacement.
As of right now, who do you say wins it? Is it Bryant?
So yeah, I mean, you got to think Bryant. The problem is, so Bryant goes on the road last week of the season in consecutive trips to Vermont, Lowell, and Maine. That'll decide the regular season. Lowell might be cooked, but those will be 3 really tough road games in succession where Maine could potentially steal it on March 1st. So, and
I don't care about the regular season. Who's going to win?
Oh, you're talking about the tournament? Oh, I don't know. The whole thing's wide open.
Well, I know you don't know, so I'm asking you to guess. Who do you think is going to win? If you had to say right now.
Bryant, yeah.
Okay. Is that it for you? You got anything else Wednesday, Thursday?
No, I'm good.
All right. That'll do it for us. Thanks to Mike and Tanner for joining me. Thanks to our producer, David, on the back end. Most importantly, thanks to all of you for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy. Head to our YouTube page, BBOC. Hit subscribe there. Even if you don't watch on YouTube, do appreciate that. We will be back Thursday night with some weekend looks with myself, Mike, and Greg. Thanks for tuning in. As always, good luck on all of your wagers this week. We'll catch y'all later. Cheers.